Gentlemen, his name is Brian Barcelona. Brian, what's going on, man?
I am enjoying a newly born baby and life. So a lot's been going on, but it's been amazing.
Brother, congratulations, man. And we know that that is not an easy time, but you are no newbie at this. You're a veteran father, now of four. So again, congrats to you, man.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is actually an even better setup now with four kids in the home, right? Healthy wife, like everything. You got your German Shepherd. You're like on 2 acres of land. Like you're getting set, right? And now you got to look back a decade and wonder, did you ever think, were you living in LA at that time about 10 years ago?
I was in LA 10 years ago.
Did you ever think that you would be where you're at right now?
Never.
Okay. So if you can go back, man, and talk to yourself for 1 minute, what would you say to that guy?
I think I would say a few things. I think I would say slow down, honor more, come under fathers, and surviving. Like when you have nothing, it's very easy to submit. When you have something, it's almost harder to survive success than it is a mess.
Wow.
So I would tell myself, there is no rush and there is no, what's the word? There is no ladder you're climbing. I mean, everything you named, it's incredible. I get to go out and have, again, 4 kids and we have an amazing home, but none of it fills me. And I think when I was younger, I always thought, well, when I have this, then maybe I will feel more satisfied. And having these things, I actually don't feel any more satisfied than I did 10 years ago. Only Jesus satisfies me. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I've been able to take away.
Wow. Spot on a minute there, man. That's fantastic, because I want the guys listening to be able to hear that over and over and over again. And I've asked this to more than 60, 70 guests on this podcast, the same exact question in the same sequence. And I want the guys that are listening to hear that the things that actually matter are not what you collect around you, but it's what you build inside of you, right? And the connections with the people that you build, right? And number one, the connection that you build with the Lord. And when those things are right, I think you're going to be much better off no matter where you find yourself, no matter if you're in LA or Texas, whether you're, in the country or overseas, like you're going to find a lot more inner peace if you're taking care of the inner stuff. And I'm actually particularly interested in what you said about, finding fathers, just with this being a men's podcast. Why was that one of the things that you would have brought up?
Yeah, fathers have a role, and let's talk biological, and then let's talk step, and then let's talk spiritual.
Absolutely.
Biological fathers have a role to give their children identity.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that in 2022, we are in the largest identity crisis in American history? It's not coincidence. It guarantee trace it to fathers.
That's right.
And where I believe fathers have lacked, you have nowadays, in essence, kids that are telling their parents what they are, who they are at a whatever young age. And what you got to understand is that that's the role of a parent, is to instruct their child in their identity. But when you have fathers that walk in shame, they're unable to do that, maybe from past mistakes or their own inabilities, or maybe they weren't fathered. You could see that in scripture, where you have David who falls with Bathsheba, and then you have Solomon who just has hundreds of wives.
Yeah.
How did you go from David, who's a king of Israel, to your son with hundreds of wives? I guarantee somewhere in their relationship, David might have felt shame from what happened with him and Bathsheba and Uriah. And that shame didn't allow him to father. You look at now stepfathers play a vital role as well. I think a lot of times people don't give enough credit to stepfathers. I mean, Joseph was a stepfather of Jesus. Jesus was born to a teenage mom and a stepdad. I mean, he can relate to this generation,
Wow.
And what's very interesting is in the lines of, you look at Jesus's genealogy, you can see that he comes from the line of David through his mother, but you can also trace the line of David through his stepfather. So because Joseph was willing to father a kid who didn't have his blood running in his veins, Jesus was also grafted into a godly lineage of David because of his willfulness to father. You look at spiritual fathers, just as you could inherit homes and you could inherit money, you can also inherit things spiritually. And I think that spiritual fathers, God brings those in to really mend up or give legacy where biological and even stepfathers did not.
Yeah.
This is where some of you listening, you don't have a father, you don't have a stepdad, but maybe you have a pastor, or there's been another spiritual mentor that's been walking with you. To the degree of health that you are willing to submit is the degree that you're willing to inherit. And I think that there's a lot of theoretical submission, but what really brings down blessing, which I think I've walked, everything that I have, who we are, the ministry, I fully credit it, obviously, first the Lord, but right after that would be fathers. And I've inherited things that I don't deserve, but it's because I've come under them.
Yeah. Heck yes. And you know what? I think listening to that as a 20-something-year-old, I have to put myself there and think that sounds and feels uncomfortable, because that means that I'm right. Like, for all intents and purposes, I'm supposed to be this grown man that's supposed to have everything together. But you're telling me I'm supposed to look to someone to my left and right to be, man, almost dependent on, and some guys don't even like using that word. I'm dependent on somebody else to pour into me, right? To give me the things that I don't yet have. And that's why I think a lot of guys would rather turn on a YouTube video and just be self-made men, right? Just learn on their own, which there's nothing wrong with that, guys. Open source, information and open source education, I'm all about it. But when you're doing that in complete isolation and you don't have anybody who's backing you in your corner, who's pouring into you, I look at that guy like as if it was somebody who just broke their leg. Like, I kind of just feel bad.
Yeah, and people need to understand there is a difference between information and wisdom.
What do you mean by that?
Information could be gathered from any source.
Sure.
But information never possesses history. This is where you can tell me how to build that chicken coop, and it's not going to matter what you tell me. I have no history in building that. Now, you come over my house and you building it with me, I'm not only gaining information, I'm gaining wisdom. There are pieces and dynamics of, hey, I know the instructions say put the board this way. I've learned slant it up just about 2 inches.
Yeah.
That's the difference between wisdom is information that is lived out over time.
Right.
That's the issue today is you have instant information at your fingertips with zero wisdom. So you have people that sound really smart, but they're really not.
Wow.
You can, and again, there's just certain things that just come with time. I think I embrace gray-headed people because I understand even my grandfather, who has a 2nd grade education, I mean, he can't give you the educational piece of things, but he's been married for 60 years.
That's right.
He may not be able to read and write the best, but he can sure give you wisdom in areas of your life that no YouTube video or no, even young guys. My pastor in LA used to say, don't read marriage books written in the last 10 years. Read the ones that were written 30, 40 years ago. Those real foundational pieces. And I don't know. I think there's so much gold in all of those things.
Absolutely. And this is not to step on anybody who has, feels like they have a calling or an anointing in a certain area, and you're coming out a little bit, maybe preemptive, but you're coming out soon with some information out there, and it's helpful, and there's wisdom in there. But man, what you're getting at, Brian, is so crucial to building a lasting society that values heritage, that values legacy, that values the passing of the torch, right? The proper passing of the torch, because that's when, like you said, wisdom is being transferred. And I'm in the same situation. I was just spending some time with my grandfather, and he told me 67 years I've been with this woman. He's holding her hand, man. And I just teared up the entire time I'm with them. My grandmother's on the verge of dementia, and he's just holding her hand. 67 years I've been with this woman. That's what he kept repeating to me. And I'm like, how many times could you have walked away? Right? How many times? Because that's what we see most often today. How many times could you have just left this behind, joined all of the other guys that you may have known that are on their 3rd wives already? But, one of the things that is so true about about him, and this isn't knocking on any generations. They had one washing machine that was fixed 60 times.
Yeah.
I've had 6 washing machines in 10 years. When one breaks, I get rid of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's real. It's real, man. And I think that there is much to learn. And I think we're in a very unique time. In another 10 years, 20 years, your grandfather won't be here.
Yeah.
But right now you have your grandfather, your father, you and your children.
Amen. Yes.
Right now we are living with 4 generations.
Yeah.
We have to absorb everything we can from that older generation.
Yeah.
In God and in wisdom. And it's not just when they say you're crushing it, you're doing a great job, you're crushing it. I mean, we need to embrace rebukes. We need to embrace moments where they say, hey, you're really prideful here. Hey, you gotta shift that. And I think that that's the hardest thing as men. If this is this podcast to men, I mean, your pride kicks in, and pride kicks in when you feel stupid. No one wants to feel stupid. No one wants to feel like they don't know.
Right.
But you're only stupid when you think you know, and you stand on the grounds of what you think you know.
That's right. That's right, man. And, Brian, I'm really interested in some of the things that you're bringing up on the social spaces. Like I was talking to you before, you're really doing a good job at targeting a younger generation of men. And just from looking at all the statistics from this podcast, I know that a good, fairly large amount of our listeners are within that generation that you're targeting, Gen Z, which we are putting at anybody who's born in 1997 and onward, right? That's considered Gen Z. And some of the things that are also coming out with Gen Z is some of the statistics around mental health, right? Wow. And I just want to read a few of them to you, and then kind of maybe we can tie in even just some of the dialogue that we've just had, and again, some of the things that you're doing, and see where we go from there. So here I'm reading, and guys, by the way, take statistics lightly. Not all statistics are 100% accurate, but I think that there's a good representation in the correlation that's happening here. So it says Gen Z is about twice as likely as Americans over 25 to battle depression and feelings of hopelessness. Mm-hmm. Gen Z is 3 times as likely as Americans over 25 to say that their challenges are so severe that they thought that they might be better off dead. Mm-hmm. And then I got more than half of the Zoomers, the Gen Z, know someone that is battling depression, and 1 in 4 have someone close to them dealing with drug addiction. 1 in 5 know someone who has died by suicide. What's that speaking to us, man? Even just in context of some of the things that we were just talking about. What are your thoughts?
I'm not going to say I'm knowledgeable in the whole mental health conversation.
Sure.
What I will say is that obviously there's been an increase of people's ability to process things that they're going through. And again, I'm not shifting blame, because I think we have to take responsibility for our lives. At the same time, I think that again, we see another issue arise from fatherlessness. We see family units that are destroyed. I remember what I went through. I came from an abusive family, 10 years of abuse. My mom was beat. I was beat, divorce. And I look at my life, and I look at my children now, and I look at my daughters, and I think, man, they've never grown up in anything I grew up. I've never hit my wife. I've never left. I've never done anything like that. God always keep me. And I think, man, their personalities, if they were to grow up in the home I grew up in, they would be destroyed. And, 10, 15 years from now, God knows. And so I think that these issues have to be addressed from within the home, right. Especially as believers. I mean, again, youth pastors exist because fathers don't do their jobs. and then we send, kids get sent to youth group at 16, have no God in their life. Like, hey, fix them in 30 minutes a week. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
And I know that, that's no parent's desire, but it's the reality. And so I think with the mental health issue and all the depression and suicide, all these things that kids are going through, man, that can really, a lot of that I feel like can really be dealt with at the table.
Yeah.
Over meals, over conversations. I know it seems simple, and then I think just making space for people to feel like they can express those hurts and pains.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And because from what you're saying, there's no hack. There's no like new, as far as we have gone in exploration, right? There's no hack in what you are saying that is transformational by tomorrow. In fact, it is generational, and it's going to take time to transform a family unit into a God-loving, God-fearing family that brings on, that carries that legacy that continues on going. And it's funny how we just can look backwards in time to really learn how we should be moving forward, right? Because I think that as we were less distracted, or there were less things to distract us, we were more focused in the home, right? Out of necessity, fathers were more in the home. And I think now, man, where there's so many options, where there's so many disillusions, or there's so many lies being spoken to men, we're completely tearing apart at the fabric. And then we don't even know we're not even being taught how to stitch it together. So like you said, we're throwing our kids into youth group and saying, here you go. Can you please teach my children? I jokingly told my wife, I want to hear what you think about this. I said, I think we should stop trying to send our kids to Sunday school. Like when we send our kids to the classroom in church, stop sending them to Sunday school, quote unquote. I think Sunday school should be for moms and dads to learn, if they want to, if they don't know, how to teach their children about Jesus. And then all of the week is Bible school for the kids. You know what I'm saying? And so Sunday becomes an equipping for the family rather than just like activities-based thing that the kids get to learn about Jesus for 10 minutes.
Yeah. And I think doing life with your kids, I mean, we pray with our kids, we read the Bible with our kids, we worship with our kids.
Yeah.
I mean, any nation I've ever traveled to preach, as that we've been able to. We've brought our kids. My kids have been to Europe, they've been to Germany, England, they've been Singapore. I mean, we're going to Argentina. We just do things. This one guy told me this, and I never forgot it. He says, Brian, don't sacrifice your family. Sacrifice as a family.
That's good. And
so it's like, Brian, how, I'm not saying that we're perfect, but my wife and I love what we do. There's obviously the price we pay as a family. She knows that she has to share her husband with congregations and traveling. I mean, 3 days after she gave birth, I preached at Bethel in Redding.
Yeah.
And this weekend I go to Florida,
Yeah.
But also when she wants to go to the mall, I go to the mall. When she wants to go get sushi, we go as a family. It's like, we do those things as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that, man. And I think that's where, again, that family unit is being knit together even more closely, right? Rather than tearing it apart, you're doing this intentional work about keeping it together, even when it's, in uncomfortable situations. You're doing that. You're doing it well. So good on you, man. That's like the example that we should continually want to emulate, all fathers and just men in general. Like, don't sacrifice your family at the altar of a career, a job, some kind of fantasy because you think it's going to bring you something of value, when at the end of the day, man, you're going to lay on your deathbed like many other people. And hopefully what you're taking with you, man, those memories, it were all worth it, right? Because you're not taking anything else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
True.
Yeah. It's true. Here's another question that I had for you, man. I was thinking about some of the things that were used back in time, to preach the gospel. And I hate putting it this way because it sounds like there's so much agenda behind it. But I know, like, for example, with boomers, there was such an awareness of like the end times, right? And so a lot of fear was being used to bring boomers into the church. And it worked, right? Because they're thinking end times, right? And so that was like a very common and popular message during that time. And I don't think that you can actually copy paste and bring that message to today's generation. I don't think it would be received in the same way that it was received in the 60s and 70s, preaching doom, right? And so you're having to show up like right now, staying relevant, right, in the social spaces and bring the same gospel. Nothing's changed about the gospel, but packaged or delivered in a different way. How do you see that being different? What are you doing right now to be able to reach this younger generation?
Yeah, Jesus rode a donkey. The last, decades, it's been cars and planes and boats. And, in the last, 5-10 years, it's been apps. Yeah. I think the message remains, believe it or not, one of the biggest questions that we got. So we had we had pretty much zero following in 2020. And like most people, when COVID hit, everyone tried to get online and, their garage setups, their home setups. We did it all. We seen something very unique in those years where we seen a movement that in One Voice, which I'm a part of, that has been around at that time for 10 years, explode to millions of followers. Yeah. And I mean, I think our hashtag views was and is 500 million. And one of the number one questions we got actually was end times, but it wasn't probably like it was years ago. It's kids just, they want to know, like, COVID and wars and living in these times. And I wasn't alive in the 60s and 70s of the Jesus movement, but I do know that God uses historically really terrible seasons in nations. And that's what we're in America. I mean, we're in a diesel shortage. We're, in wars around the world. You have the, don't want to get into any politics, but you have, the China that's rising up like it's never risen up. I mean, and it seems very similar to the 60s, where you had Russia and you had all these, missile threats and all these things going on. And I don't think that we're to ever play on fear. I do think that we are to know that perfect love casts out fear. Amen. So atmospheres of fear present the greatest landing strip for love, and God is love. And so I would say, man, if you're preaching end times, which is not a message that I'm strong in, I'm not the most knowledgeable. I need to be more in eschatology. I can't tell you about the seals and the trumpets, and I got buddies that can. I'm not as knowledgeable as they are. But I will say in Matthew 24, when Jesus is laying out all that's going to happen, smack dab in the middle of that verse, after listing all of these terrible things that will come, it says, and this gospel will be preached. And so I just think that the good news is always smack dab in the center of crisis. It's smack dab in the center of hardships. Yeah. And I just think to embrace that, and let God give you the language to speak to this generation. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the added challenge of not having the attention span of, and anything bigger than 60 seconds, I find that challenging. I'm trying, like, going against my desire, because I know that I need to learn to focus better. That's something I'm always working on. But yeah, in some of the ways that you're showing up, you're like, I got 60 seconds to tell somebody this, right? Which you can never give the entire gospel in 60 seconds, but man, you can give some consumable chunks that people can walk away with and be like, I think I'm hungry for more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What is, if you could just tell a little bit more about Jesus Clubs and then One Voice.
Jesus Clubs and One Voice started 13 years ago, and it has just become a movement of young people all over the world now, 6 continents. There's Jesus clubs. Students are getting empowered to lead, these Jesus clubs. And they're owning it, man. I mean, the gospel is being preached on campuses, obviously digital. We're doing Gen Z for Jesus, which is our tours and stadiums, arenas, I should say. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how long, I feel like movements sometimes come in waves. You have movements that are very relevant in generations. And so, God's breathing on one voice right now. And I want to, if revival's a wave that's moving, I want to ride it.
Yeah.
And, I don't need to create it, but I definitely want to be ready to be a part of it when it's hitting. And I think it is. I think we're in times of revival. And I think reformation will come soon.
Yeah.
And reformation obviously always is the greatest indication of revival. Revival isn't dancing in the church. Revival isn't packed services. I mean, that would mean that secular concerts were revival.
Yeah.
Lou says revival is God's arrival. And one of those fruits of that is change.
Yeah. What kind of reformation are you talking about? Like, what do you envision being some of the major change that would come upon this country? The world, right? That's the large vision that you're carrying through this revival. I
think economic reform, for sure. You see a nation that's blessed economically. You see, morals that shift. You see laws that shift and change.
Yeah.
You see conversions of people's lives, and it's authentic. It's not something that's fabricated or, I wasn't alive, but I heard in the 60s, you go up to somebody, they say, what time is it? It's time to get saved. All right. And they give their life to Christ. I mean, it's almost like the veil becomes thin and you're just able to connect with God, in a way like never before. I preached in schools that it felt like that. I preached in schools where it was, you just felt like there was no distance between God and you anymore. I mean, I would just preach and just hundreds would be weeping in gyms. And you're just like, this is not normal. We're in a public school in East LA. It's 12 o'clock lunch and 400 kids are weeping in a gym and hundreds are giving their lives to Christ publicly.
Yeah.
And then obviously the next stage of that is, okay, you've given your life to Christ. You've had the emotional connection with God, which again, I don't think we should throw out the emotional experience. Sometimes people say, it's not about your emotions. Come on. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Pretty sure you felt emotions when you met your wife, and for me to say, that's just ridiculous. Get rid of those emotions. You'd be like, bro, you're tripping. Like your emotions are the initial igniting flame of any relationship. Obviously your emotions don't keep you in the relationship, but they sure play a part in engaging you in it.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And it's just helpful to know, like, every single thought that we have carries an emotion. And so neurologically speaking, it's just when people say, you're being more emotional, for example, it's just that you're expressing that emotion that's attached to that thought or feeling more than somebody else. And when you're in the presence of the creator, there is that that desire to express that. There's that ability to openly express that. So I'm 100% with you. If you're going to tell me that I wasn't, showing 100% emotion, falling in love with my beautiful bride, I'd be lying to you, right? Like, I was head over heels with this girl, but like you said, like, that's not what kept me in. And that's actually exactly where I wanted to go, because, as we are just sharing the gospel at this massive rate, right? Because there's a lot of people who are able to get on TikTok and profess Jesus and give a little snippet, for example, Instagram, wherever. And that's not all you're doing, but this is just an example. Let's say you're reaching 500 million people through video. And then let's say, a certain percentage or amount of people get saved.
Yeah.
But then what?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that this is where this idea and this desire for the podcast was birthed, because I became a Christian man. I became aware of my sin, what Christ died for, who he is in my life, sort of. I say sort of because there was a lot of learning into the different dimensions of that. But then I was left being told, hey, you got to carry your cross, but nobody's showing me how to do that. Like, what does that even mean? And what do you think about that? How can we do better at just displaying that, showing that, and teaching that? What are your thoughts?
I was in 2021 December. I watched a documentary called Sheep Among Wolves. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, not watched it.
Highly suggest you watch it. It was probably one of the most profound documentaries. I actually got to meet the leader there in the documentary. Okay. He's blurred out. I got to meet him. It's about the fastest growing church in the world, and it's in Iran. And in this documentary, they said some things that were very challenging to my Western way of thinking.
I watched it. You're right. Yep. I remember.
And I think the first thing is, what is the gospel? And I think, when you're in the West, you say, what is the gospel? You will hear this answer. Christ died. He rose again, the forgiveness of my sins. And obviously that is very good news. The gospel means good news. It is good news. But if that was true, then how did Jesus preach the gospel when he was alive? He hadn't died yet. Take it a step further, when does conversion happen? I mean, when so were Jesus's disciples saved when they were performing miracles? Because he hadn't died yet. Right? This starts getting, it challenges a little bit. And so in the method of the Iranian church is different than the West. And I'm not saying that what we've done in the West is wrong. It's God's using the method, the Billy Graham method of crusades and preaching in that way. I mean, I've preached and seen many commit Christ in that way. But when you're in a nation like Iran, you can't hold a crusade. So what do? So they have a system of winning the lost that's a little bit different. They don't win the lost and then disciple. They disciple you unto conversion. And if you look at Jesus, that's what he did. He never went up to the disciples and said, accept me in your heart, believe that I came. And he said, follow me.
Yes.
And I don't know when Peter's conversion took place. Was it when he followed and left his nets? Was it when he said, you are the Christ? Was it when he preached in Acts? Was it when he hung upside down, being a martyr? I don't know. But somewhere in his journey, conversion took place.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times here in the West, we want to see, when we judge a conversion off of a hand or an altar response.
Right.
I do believe that God moves that way. And I do believe that those are authentic conversions. But what do you do about the guy that doesn't answer that altar call, but he's coming every week?
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
So, I think discipleship, man, it's messy. It's long-term. You deal with issues in people's lives and generational stuff. And pretty sure there's things you still navigate through. There's things I navigate through. And, I think that's why it's vital to know, like the parable of the sower. There's 4 different types of soil, but there's one common thing. The sower never prejudged if the seed would grow. He never looked at the rocks and said, I don't really think this is going to grow here. He didn't look at the road and say, you know what, that heart looks really hard. That guy's really way out there. I'm not even going to waste my time. He just kept sowing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good, man. And I mean, it's even the same thing as like the Lord calls us to be fishers, right? Like we're just fishing them indiscriminately. We're fishing, right? And he's the one that guts them, right? Like he gets to the core and cleans it out, man. But we're not like here throwing a net in and being fishers of men and just tossing them back because we're like, this one doesn't meet my standards. This one is a little bit too rough. This one's too fishy.
Yes.
Yeah. So spot on. And so I think from what you said, the response there then is discipleship. Discipleship is that gap that we need to bridge. And this is where I feel like a lot of people might have a misconception about where the church needs to go here in the next, let's say, decade, 2 decades, because there's these large mega churches that have popped up that people, tune into, and they're like, well, I'm going to church online, right? That's fine, right? I don't think we're bound to just like sit your butt in a seat and that's the only way that you can receive the gospel and learn about the Lord that day. But I'm going to tell you right now, I have grown more as a leader of Marines, as a man, as a husband, as a father in a small church with less than 70 people than I have in some of the best military schools that the United States Marine Corps can produce. Like, I'm gonna tell you that right now, straight up, because there's just some things that transcend what is happening now that you get when you're sitting in that in the body with the body, right? You're together as a church and just experiencing God in a new way, man. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, everyone has their process and everyone has their ways that God reaches them. And I think it's not cookie cutter, and it's not, you are learning in the dynamic that God's designed for you to learn in. I do think there are basic ingredients that are needed. I don't want to leave it a free for all.
Yeah.
You're hearing God talk to a tree, every day. And that's kind of weird.
Let's not do that, guys.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
At the same time, I do embrace that the way Jesus saved me is different than how he saved you.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of disciplines you're going to have and learn are very unique to maybe disciplines that I've had to learn in travel or whatever. It's different, but we have the same calling. There are people you're to reach that I'll never reach. And there are people that I'm to reach that you may have a chance to reach or may not have a chance to reach. It's why we need one another. And
that's right.
Yeah, I think that's how denominations get formed, is they encounter God one way and they think this is the only way. Let's create an entire denomination off of a moment or off of a style or
right.
Off of an encounter. I thank God that Moses didn't create a denomination called Burning Bush Denomination, where everyone had to encounter God through a burning bush. It just wasn't. It's ridiculous. I'm not saying denominations are bad. I'm just saying, I embrace those that are Baptist. I embrace those that are Pentecostal. I embrace those that, they may shake and bake, and then those that may never lift a hand. I don't know. You believe that God heals. You don't believe that God heals. The only difference, we're both going to heaven. You just might walk sick. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not deal breakers for me. There are deal breakers, the cross and, salvation and grace. And, obviously those are biblical.
Yeah.
But some of those other things I just don't even bother with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right, man. And we will get hung up a lot of times on those, I'll say, more petty things. And cling to what we know or what we think we know, because, if I believe this and I'm wrong, I have a greater thing to lose. And then I believe whatever you believe and you are wrong. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, there's this desire to cling to what you know and only that, and that's correct. And, but just in general, man, the fact that we are able to get in a body and learn and grow and be discipled, again, to go back to that key term, to get discipled, right? And to go back to the beginning of this conversation, for the men listening, to get discipled by strong, faithful men who are willing to sit in your corner and patiently, guide you and accept your mess, right? I think we long for that. We long for somebody to look at us in progress, right? Because we haven't arrived, and I don't think we'll ever just arrive, right? To look at us in progress and still see that potential and call it out of us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's true.
Brian, I'm just thankful, man, to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you. For the guys that are listening, the guys that just want to learn a little bit more about One Voice, about Jesus Clubs, about you and what you're doing, where do you want to send them and where could they go?
Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, website. Anywhere they want. Yeah.
And guys, all of that is going to be down below. And you guys are going to be blown away just with the content, the material, all of the things that Brian's able to put out. And man, I've been blessed by it. I know many other people have. So again, Brian, thank you so much, man, for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me, man.